Hey guys, what's up? It's Emily. Welcome back to my channel. If you're here today, you're probably looking to read this year, maybe, depending on when you're discovering this video. I'm releasing it at the beginning of the new year of 2025. I know at the top of the new year, we're all looking to form better habits and make this year even better than the last year. I think I made this video twice already, but this past year, I read more books than I've ever read in a year. I read 102 books. The previous year, I had read 68 books, and then the year before that I read like 52 or something. So there's a pretty significant increase in my reading last year, and I feel like I really got into a very specific flow that worked for me, and so I kind of wanted to redo this video and share it with you. The idea of being a reader is just like cool now, I guess. Like, I feel like a lot of people really want to be that, or like whatever that idea is, but when it actually comes time to selecting books and forming the habit, it can be challenging if you are not a regular reader already, or even if you are a regular reader already and you want to like read more. This book is for you. No, not this book. This video is for you. I read 102 books this year. I did learn a lot. I think the number one thing that you don't want to feel when you are reading is like pressure to read or feel like it's a job to read. The most important thing to get in touch with is like what books bring you joy, like what kind of books do you actually want to read. I think oftentimes people get into reading and they're like, okay, these are like the it girl books, these are the hot girl books. Usually they're dense literary fiction or something like that. When people first get into reading, they make the mistake of like going right for denser books and books that are maybe a little more, not advanced, but just require more energy to read. And I think if you're first getting into reading, I think it's really important in order to form habits to just like read books that are easier. Like read a rom-com, read a mystery thriller, read a YA fantasy, you know, like read whatever you want as you're forming the habit of reading. I feel like that's so important. And don't put pressure on yourself to read a certain type of book to just like present as a certain type of reader. I know it's hard. Like I live in Bushwick and you go to a coffee shop and like you look around and you're like, oh, that girl's reading like Joan Didion, she's so cool, you know, but I feel like just putting pressure on yourself to do that, you'll never want to pick up the book if it's not something that you're actually interested in. So get in touch with what you're actually interested in, removed from weird like social pressures to read cool books. So it's like, cool, okay, how do I find books that I love if I haven't like read a lot yet? That's a great question. I wanted to wear earrings. I forgot to put them in. Whatever. I think a great place to do that is like watching book content. And I'm not just saying that because I'm like a booktuber. Like you can go on Book Talk, you can go on Bookstagram, BookTube, whatever. Watching book content is also a really great place to start, not only to kind of get a sense of like which books within those buzzworthy books are books that maybe are more your style or your pace or your genre, but I think also watching book content like makes me excited to read. Like I'll watch a book vlog and I'll watch someone like set the scene and light a candle and make themselves a cup of tea and get snug and get their book. Like it makes me want to read too. Engaging with that content is also just really encouraging, for me at least, to pick up a book and like get cute with my book. My toxic trait is that I've never DNF'd a book. I've never DNF'd, for those of you that do not know, means did not finish. If you start reading a book and it's like torture for you, do the nightstand test. Look at the book on your nightstand and be like, am I excited to pick this up? Am I like running to pick this up, or do I look at it and dread it? Do I have a feeling of like a small feeling of dread in my soul? I think that's a really good test. And if you have a small feeling of dread, like pick another book. Life is too short to force yourself to read a book that you don't want to read, especially if you're like just getting into reading. Like be easy on yourself. The first year I got back into reading, I read pretty much exclusively like Colleen Hoover books and like quick mystery thrillers and like some rom-coms. You can too, like that's okay. The number one tip that I have, I'll share at the end so you watch the whole thing. Treating your book like a phone in some ways. So for example, a lot of times people will bring their phone into the bathroom with them. Bring your book, bring your Kindle. A lot of times people, when they're traveling like on the subway, for example, I live in New York, I'll look around and like a lot of people will be on their phones just kind of scrolling. Actually, a lot more people have been reading recently. You should just always have your book with you. Wherever you go, it should be in your handbag. If you show up to like a coffee meeting and you're waiting for the person to be there, they're running late, take out your book and read. Like just always have it with you. Treat it like a phone from the standpoint of always have it with you. Bring that with you into the bathroom, not your phone. Put your book on your nightstand, so it's the first thing you look at when you wake up, not your phone. You know what I mean? Treating it like something that you're bringing with you everywhere. There are so many little times in the day where instead of picking up your phone and scrolling, you could pick up your book and read for like 5 minutes. You know what I mean? I also this year started reading more on my Kindle. I've had a Kindle for like, I want to say 10 years. And I really have not used it or like read a full book on it really until this year. There is something about the Kindle for me specifically. I do feel like I read faster on the Kindle. It might be because I can make the words bigger and it just like goes quicker. Like my eyes can like kind of scan it quicker. But I do think that I read faster on the Kindle. I like knowing how many pages I have left, how many hours I have left in a book. You might not experience the same thing, but I would say give the Kindle a try. Like try to read a full book on your Kindle and like see if that helps. And it is just so easy. It's really nice. I don't have to use a reading light with my Kindle. You know, it lights up. It's a little easier to transport than a book. So just give the Kindle a try if you haven't. A common mistake people make when they first get into reading is the time that they set aside to read in their like daily routine is like before bed. Do not do that. You will fall asleep. You will read 5 pages. You will fall asleep. Definitely find dedicated time in the day to read. That's not just, oh, I'm going to read on the train because whatever. Like find like dedicated time to be like, I'm going to sit down and read, and do not make that time when you get in bed because you won't read. I personally love reading for about an hour every morning. Like I wake up, do my skincare, make my coffee, brush my teeth, get back in bed with my coffee and a book. And that's kind of like how I wake up. I get my reading in. I know I'm not going to fall back asleep unless I wake up really early, but that usually doesn't happen. And I also know that like I'm getting literature instead of Instagram first thing in the morning, which is also just really good for the mental health. Personally, I think reading for an hour in the morning is the best time of day to do it. It's like a fresh start in the morning. You can really sit down. You just woke up, like you're ready to like kind of pay attention to something. If you're like me or like many people, you know, you're kind of used to picking up your phone and scrolling. So it's like, instead of doing that, it's just a good place to kind of consume ideas first thing in the morning. So just having that like dedicated time of day. And then obviously like sometimes I'll read during my lunch break and sometimes I'll read as I'm waiting for the sauce to cook or something like that. That's not really a dedicated planned time. I think having that set time that you've like scheduled to read, I hesitate to use the word scheduled because then it feels like a chore, but like dedicating time. I'm going to sit down with intention and read this book. And that is like the only activity. I'm not doing it because I'm waiting for the sauce to cook. I'm not doing it because I'm also traveling from point A to point B. Like I'm doing it because I'm sitting down and I'm reading, and that's it. The next tip I have is keeping variety in a bunch of different ways. If you're reading like the same thing over and over again, it's going to get boring and like you're really not going to be interested. The first thing to keep a variety with is genre. Even like I said, like the first year I got back into reading, I read like rom-coms, Colleen Hoover, like character-driven type books, and like thrillers, and like some nonfiction, but I didn't read all of one genre. I think finding like a few genres that you can go back and forth with, I find it so nice to sit down with like a nonfiction or like a self-help book once or twice a month in between a lot of fiction. If I were just reading nonfiction, I would not enjoy reading those types of books. Similar vice versa. If I'm just reading fiction, it's like, okay, I'm getting kind of like bored of this. Like I kind of want to read some facts. I kind of want to like learn about something new. Finding that variety of genre and making sure that that variety still includes all books that you want to read and no books that are like a chore to read. Like you don't have to read dense like historical accounts of anything. You know, it's like just finding the variety and genre while still staying true to them all being books that you're excited to read. I would also do a variety of size. I feel like the first year I got back into reading, I read mostly 300, 400 page books. And then the second year I read a lot of 800 page books. And so it was important for me. I think it's good to read long books. I think you should challenge yourself to do that as long as you're interested in the material. But I think after you do that, read a short, quick little rom-com. Keep it varied. If you're reading A Little Life, followed by A Secret History, followed by the Crescent City series, it's gonna feel too overwhelming. You're gonna feel like you're finishing books slower. Momentum is key. Feeling the momentum is key. And I think variety is the key to momentum. Personally, that's what I found. I also think reading a bunch of shorter books usually can get boring too. Having that variety, I think, is great. I remember like I read a really long book and then I read an 80-page play after. And that was like, okay, like we're palate cleansing cleansing. I'm still keeping up momentum. I feel like even though it took me maybe a week to read one book, where I usually read 2 books in a week, it's like, okay, now I can read this short little book and feel like I'm like back on track and feel like I'm still like having that momentum, even though I'm reading longer books. So kind of piggybacking off of that, I think setting goals is really important, and finding the balance between like setting a goal but not having that goal feel like a chore is also really important. For example, last year I set my goal at the beginning of the year to 75 books because the previous year I had read almost 70 books. So I was like, I'm not going to set this for super, super high. Like I'm not going to set it to 100 at the beginning of the year because I don't want to create an unattainable goal that I would like complete naturally. Like I don't want this to turn into like another job. Like I definitely don't have the capacity for that. But then I realized I was reading more naturally, so then I upped my goal to 100. Yes, I think it's important to set goals. It will help you have accountability for like that habit forming, but you don't want to set goals to the extent that like it's now going to turn into a job and it's like you're just reading through these pages just to like hit your quota. Finding that balance is really important. So like I said before, reading a really long book and then a little short book, I think will help you feel that momentum towards your goal building. You just have to be careful with choosing books to fulfill the goal. The number one priority should always be, am I excited to read this book? If the answer is no, then it doesn't matter what your goals are. Goodreads is where I go. I tried Fable, and I might get back to that. I really enjoy like their statistics on there. Fable didn't upload all of my Goodreads. There's a way to like sync it up, and like it just never uploads like all of the books that I've read, so that's a little irritating. I don't want to have to update it in 2 places. I feel like I have like all of my friends on Goodreads that I have the connections with. So I don't know, that might change. I might figure out a way to incorporate Fable more into my reading this year. But for me, Goodreads is just like very simple. You set the goal and you have like bookshelves that you want to read. You have books that you have read. You get to rate it. And I do think in general, Goodreads is the best place to go for an actual idea of what the average rating of a book is. Other places are a little inflated. Like I feel like Amazon, the ratings are a little higher than I tend to agree with. I think the average rating on Goodreads is a really good barometer. And the Goodreads reading challenge is also just like very satisfying to partake in, see exactly how many books you've read and see it all laid out. Another tool, I feel like this could be applied in short and long-term situations, taking breaks. This could mean, okay, I read 3 books this week, so I'm gonna take 4 or 5 days off of reading because I need to like process what I just read, and like I feel like after reading 3 books in a week, like I don't personally feel like reading right now. There's a difference between like trying to form a reading habit and being like a little like, I don't really want to read. And then there's just like reading burnout. If you're reading a lot and you all of a sudden are like, I'm looking at all of these books on my TBR shelf and I don't want to read any of them, you're probably at risk for burnout. So just like take a few days off. This year, the year that I read the most books, I also took the most time off of reading. So from like June through August, I was in production for this film that like Jean-Luc and I wrote and he directed and we both produced it and I was in it. It just took up a lot of my time. In the summer, I read, over the course of 3 months, I read 12 books. That's 4 books a month. So that's like about a book a week, which is not a lot for me. So that, for me, I consider a break, even though it's not like a total break. When I'm like really reading, I'm reading like 3 or 4 books a week. So that was like, I've pulled back and I've said, okay, I really like don't have the capacity to sit down and read as much as I usually do. And I'm gonna like just listen to that and let myself be a little slow. And then at the end of the year, the last 2 weeks of December, I had reached my goal and I was like, I'm done. I read 102 books. My goal was 100. I was like, I'm gonna take 2 weeks off and I'm gonna see what happens. Like, am I gonna sit down and watch reality TV? Am I gonna be social? Am I gonna go on my phone? Who cares? I don't care. I went on my phone a lot, if I'm being honest. I went on my phone a lot. Everything should be in moderation. I do think with anything you do, if you're doing it a lot, you do need to take breaks from it. There's like, I'm still working on forming the habit of reading and I don't want to read. And then there's like reading burnout. I don't want to read. If you form the habit and you're reading a lot, you're in a slump, let yourself be in a slump. Take a few days off, like intentionally take a few days off. Be like, I'm gonna watch reality TV the next 3 days and I'm not gonna read anything. I think that honestly is just so helpful because a lot of times I do feel like I could be reading right now. You just don't want to go there because once you start pushing through these slumps and like these reading burnouts, reading will become severely unenjoyable for you. You know yourself, like you know how much you want to read, you know how much you've been reading. Take the necessary breaks and like check in with yourself. The number one tip that I have for you that I think I discovered it more at like the ends. And when I say discovered lightly, we all know it's there, but like started really doing and like discovered for myself more towards the end of 2023, but I really implemented it this year, is audiobooks. Audiobooks help so much because you can listen to an audiobook when you're doing something else. If I'm cooking, if I'm cleaning, if I'm walking, at least in the city, like I'm not going to walk with a book in my hand. I'm just not going to do that. There are many times during the day where I have the mental space to read, but I can't like really physically read. And that's where the audiobooks have been really, really helpful. Sometimes I'll listen in the shower. Sometimes I'll listen like when I'm getting ready, when I'm like doing my skincare, when I'm tidying up the house, when I'm traveling in the car, driving. Obviously, you're not going to be reading a physical book when you're driving. So there are just so many hours in the day, honestly, where I listen to audiobooks because I'm just doing stuff that doesn't require any mental activity. There are some times where I'm reading like two books at once, where like I'm reading a physical book and then I'm listening to another book completely. Then there's other times where like I'll have the physical copy of the book and I'll be listening to the audiobook and I'm alternating back and forth. And I really like that too. For example, the book I'm reading now, I'm doing that with specifically because I love these audiobooks. When a character has a different native accent or native country than I do, it does add a certain level of emotional context that you just can't get if I'm just like reading it. This takes place in Cork, Ireland. So like I really get, like when I listen to the audiobook, I get that kind of like extra audio context, I guess. But then it's also like I'm sitting down and I'm reading it like in between. I listen to audiobooks in a few places actually. One is Audible. And what's really cool about Audible, which I figured out, is I also have Kindle Unlimited. And if I'm listening to the same book on Audible that I'm reading on my Kindle, it will sync up. If I stop listening on chapter 7 and then I open my Kindle, it'll open on chapter 7. And then if I read chapters 7 and 8 on my Kindle, it will open to chapter 9 on my Audible, like when I go to listen to it. So that's really cool. I personally have an Audible subscription. It's like $14 a month or something, $15 a month, and you get 1 credit. But a lot of times the books on Audible are $25, so it's a good deal, I think. Maybe that's just what they want us to think, but whatever. Also, Spotify has a bunch of audiobooks now. I think you get, with the Spotify premium subscription, which I already like had, I think you get 15 hours, either 12 or 15 hours included per month, and then you can like top it up for $12 for 10 hours. Spotify's a great place if I'm like specifically reading a physical book and just want to keep reading it while I'm like cooking or something. I could kind of like clock into a chapter and like not have to buy the whole book, if that makes sense. Libby's also a great place for audiobooks. There's often like a huge wait time on books with any sort of popularity, but you know, you can get put on the wait list and just kind of plan. And then also Book of the Month. I've been doing audiobooks for that. I'm really trying to not have as many physical books and like buy as many books because of space and paper and like the environment. Book of the Month just has all these like huge hardcover books. While I love that, it's like I'm really trying to only buy books right now that I'm like in love with and like really, really, really love, just because I don't have the space for it. So I have been diving into Book of the Month's audiobook feature as of recent, and like that's also a great place to kind of build a nice little library. Listening to books has been such a helpful tool in keeping up the momentum. That's kind of it, I think. That's it. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you have any other tips that I have not mentioned, feel free to share. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and we can open the discussion up. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you in the next one.